All right, here we go. Tennessee just wrapped up their press conference. Josh Heupel visiting with the media. Players will be available, but wanted to get on top of the news as quickly as possible. And Caleb, that is, we weren't expecting, at least I wasn't, Jayla McCullough news on him. That happened late yesterday with the arrest, with the felony aggravated assault charge after punching a person who apparently went into the wrong apartment. McCullough allegedly chased him down, and they ended up having words, and a punch was thrown. So I didn't expect Josh Heupel to say a lot, and he didn't.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to say a lot either. As a matter of fact, the most revealing thing to me was about the state of the Vols at safety without McCullough, because he said, I mean, you always talk about red flags, and we said this at the beginning of the year when he said that they've got a lot of guys who could take that top cornerback role, which meant they have nobody. He said that they have flexibility in the secondary and guys who can play multiple positions. That's not really an answer as to who would fill in for Jayla McCullough at safety. And McCullough's been average. I don't think he's been that great at safety this year. But I think we saw with Warren Burrell before last week's game. It's funny, we're starting this press conference off piling on with negativity, but we have seen, you can get a lot worse than average. And that was very clear at the number one cornerback spot. So even though I think Jayla McCullough has been average to mediocre, I think that there's a possibility things could get a heck of a lot worse without him, particularly if Bryce Young is playing for Alabama this week.
Yes, which I got a notion from someone. It was not, I'm not reporting this, but the sense was that he will play this week, talking about Bryce Young, who didn't play last week against A&M. I'm not reporting he'll play. I'm just saying I've heard from someone close to Alabama's program with inner working knowledge of some of the inner workings that they expect him to play. However, that does not mean he will play. And I think what you're going to see, based off the person that I talked to, you're going to see Jalen Milroe get the majority of the snaps and in practice, because they need to have something ready for him, and they know what they got out of Bryce Young. So we'll see. It's a shoulder joint that is his throwing shoulder. I don't know, but as far as the McCullough issue, you're right. Tennessee, Josh Heupel did not specify who would step in. I mean, you would love to be able to say, just like when Cedric Tillman was out, and we'll address his availability for Saturday here in just a moment. You'd love to be able to say, feel really good about Brew McCoy, feel really good about Jalen Hyatt, feel really good, those guys. And that guy is not out there right now for Tennessee secondary. Warren Burrell, we already mentioned, is out for the season. I think we got that in there. And with the injury, and Tennessee, probably their worst position group might be down 2 on Saturday against Alabama if McCullough is suspended. We'll see. There's a lot of gray area there and what he may or may have not done, Caleb, but the charge of aggravated assault and a felony is still a significant charge.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, really serious. Again, you're right. We don't make, I'm not going to make character assassinations or anything like that. No, I don't know what went on. Nobody knows. But just from purely all in the field perspective, he's facing a serious charge, and that could be very devastating for the Vols on the field without him. We'll kind of have to see how things work out. On the other side, I was actually going to ask you something that stood out to me on the press conference. Was we talked about, we talked a couple of weeks ago that we thought J.J. Crawford was pretty much done at left tackle, and Heupel touted his play without Gerald Mincey. Do you play Crawford or Mincey this week? Because I thought Crawford was better over the weekend than Mincey has been all year.
I think it's funny how a lot of times as fans and media, you say that guy's by far better. And I'm not talking about what you just said. I'm talking about in the preseason, okay? There are a lot of times coaches are down to 51 to 49%. That it's really, really close. I think Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker, great example of that last year. They played the wrong guy. It's probably the only significant mistake that Josh Heupel has made in a year and almost a half. So, yeah, I mean, they might lean towards Crawford. Now, one thing that I found really intriguing, the way he phrased his words, was about Gerald Mincey. He said he just wasn't available and was kind of abrupt. And this was not the usual jovial Josh Heupel that we've seen the past couple of Mondays. Even going into LSU and Florida, he knew he had to answer Jayla McCullough questions. And I wondered aloud to myself, was something wrong with Gerald Mincey that didn't have to do with a physical ailment? Okay, so I did reach out to somebody over the weekend, and they said it was indeed an injury. So that's what I was told. So I'm going to go with that. And if that's not the case, that's fine. But I thought he answered it in a weird way. If you watched the press conference, you might have said, was he hurt or suspended? I was told it was injury related.
Well,
But
it's worth noting, too, that Heupel specifically touted Crawford's run blocking, and that was the best run game Tennessee's had all year on Saturday, by far.
right. So getting back to your point, hopefully clarifying a little bit of that I have been told that it was definitely injury related by a University of Tennessee spokesman. I would say that, yeah. I mean, you might have Crawford might be a gamer. Mincey might not. I think Mincey has. I watched him very closely the first couple weeks. I think that Mincey has more athletic ability, but sometimes a guy's a gamer, and sometimes a guy goes out and plays really well, and that might be the case with Crawford. I didn't think of it that way, but you could be exactly right.
Or could it also just be that Mincey may be better, but Crawford's just more ready now, more disciplined? And then you think, okay, when you're playing a team like Alabama, do you go for the discipline, don't make mistakes left tackle, or do you go for the guy with the raw potential? Because one of those people is going to be responsible for Will Anderson.
Yeah. Like I've said, there are a lot of times that it's really close in a coach's mind. So could that change what Tennessee thinks moving forward as far as that left tackle position? It certainly could. I can't believe we haven't gotten to Cedric Tillman yet, but I get the feeling that Cedric Tillman will be available if he wants to be available on Saturday, just by the verbiage. And I'm reading in between the lines. It was our medical staff. What Heupel said, our medical staff and Cedric will make the decision that's right for him and in the future. So we're going at right at a month, and we saw Bryce Young suffer this injury and undergo the tightrope procedure twice during his career and come back within a month. So we're right at that. So I get the feeling it's as simple as this. Does Tillman want to push it against Alabama? Does he want to go out there, and can they tell him that there's a 10% risk of further injury because it's not stable yet? Or is there a 1% chance? Or is there a 30% chance? And then he will have to make that determination. But I think Josh Heupel's looking out for his player and the long-term interest of his player because it benefits him long-term to say he's got his back. So I think Tillman's going to have a big say in this. I don't think anybody, including Tillman, will probably know until Saturday morning.
Yeah, and I think what really stood out to me is, and this is all somewhat connected, Josh Heupel did say Tillman got the surgery to play in this game. That was his exact quote. And I think that Tillman, we talked about it last week, there was no reason to play him against LSU. The matchup already favored the Vols without Tillman. Not that we knew that Tennessee was going to win 40-13. We didn't think that, but there was no added matchup advantage with or without Tillman. Just the nature of LSU's defense and how they play and the flow of the game, and we knew that going in, that you could get out of Brew McCoy what you could get out of Cedric Tillman in that game. I don't think the same thing is true for Alabama, and so I think that they are going to play in this situation a guy. Like we talk about, a gamer. And I know people hate that word sometimes. Football experts don't like when we talk about intangibles, or, they want to try to break everything down to a science. But Cedric Tillman has some intangibles that you just can't quantify, particularly the number of game-changing touchdowns he scored. And so I think this was about him getting back for this week, particularly with the fact that next week they have UT Martin.
Right.
So if Tillman bangs himself up a little bit more, he's got another 2 weeks to recover. And after UT Martin, it's Kentucky, and Kentucky may not be that good this year. We still don't know. I mean, they're having some issues on their own. So if something goes wrong here, Tillman still he could have up to 3 to 4 weeks to recover.
You're right. And I think he wants to play. I'm reading between the lines or reading between the tweets, so to speak. But right after the game, he said, man, I love this team. He had the surgery, is what Heupel said, to be back for this Alabama game. So I think he clearly wants to play, Caleb, and I think he wants to be out there. This is a day and age of, hey, sit out the bowl game or sit out your senior season because you can better prepare yourself for the NFL draft. I think Tillman and this entire Tennessee team have a very refreshing approach that it's still a game, and you still want to go out there and win it. So that's kind of different than
Well, I agree, but it's college football's fault that players started doing that because bowl games got more meaningless over time. Let's just be honest. With the expansion of the playoff, nobody cares about the bowls anymore that aren't playoff games, and not paying players. I would tell players if my kid were a superstar first round draft pick, I would tell them not to play a bowl game. Now during the season, yeah, you're trying to build help your draft stock, but now with NIL money, which as we know, Tennessee got some NIL money. I think with the fact that Tennessee has something to play for, because you don't want to use the dirty word, but as of right now, it's very feasible that for the first time ever, when the first college football playoff rankings come out, Tennessee will actually find themselves in the hunt. That doesn't mean they'll stay in the hunt, but they've never been in that situation before. And with those facts, there's more to play for at Tennessee. The NIL money's there. This is a big game. And Cedric Tillman still probably has a little bit of work to do for his draft stock. He came back for a reason.
Nope. I agree. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to play. I think he wants to play. You brought up the NIL money. That's a great point. I haven't heard him on a lot of commercials, but I would imagine that he is he's making some coin somewhere. I know he's in New York City at Madison Square Garden at one point. So I think he's doing okay with some good investments. Who knows? The guy may already be financially independent for the rest of his life. So if you bring up a good point with NIL money, this is Alabama. This is a team that seems to really care about one another and play to kind of change people's perception of them. I think if it's 50-50, he probably goes out there and gives it a go. But again, those high ankle sprains too, you suffer one of those. I don't know if you have before, but man, you turn that thing once and for the rest of your life. And I didn't undergo the same procedure, obviously. I didn't have the same medical care, but I've got one ankle that turns a lot easier than the other one, day in and day out. And I'm 48 years old, and it happened when I was 17. And the other one never turns. So there's that to consider, but there's every reason for him to play. Anything else, Caleb, that you took out of? I will add this one thing, and we touched on it. Maybe it was just the McCullough arrest, but he seemed to be a little bit more tight, tense during this press conference than in previous weeks. Did you read anything into that, or?
Yeah, I think so too. I thought the exact same thing. He seemed a little down, and it was weird given how, but he was up last week and he was talking about the great week of practice. Maybe this what they did practice before the media session today, I think.
Yes,
so maybe this was not a great day of practice, and
could be as simple as that.
Yeah, it could just be that, which you don't want to have a bad day of practice ahead of Alabama, but it's Monday, it's early. But I did gather the same thing. I guess the one thing I would bring up, I'm glad Heupel said what we've been saying, which is there was this weird, odd panic over Byron Young not really doing up to last week, not doing what he had done last year. And anybody that was watching Byron Young throughout the year knew he really was. And like Heupel said, it's a lot of the times out of the edge rusher's control, whether or not he actually gets the sack or not.
Right.
And Byron Young has been getting the pressure. Florida has only allowed 3 sacks on the year. Against the only other team that was really vulnerable to getting sacked, Byron Young got a sack against Pittsburgh, and he was SEC Defensive Player of the Week. He won it again this week. So we were all worried about Byron Young, and I'm like, this guy's 6 weeks into the season, twice he's SEC Defensive Player of the Week. I don't know what people were so freaked out about.
Yeah, I think they're fine there. I think he got named SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week.
Excuse me. Yeah.
No, this week just came out, and then he got Defensive Player of the Week, didn't he? Earlier in the season,
was it player or was that lineman too? It might have been lineman both times.
No, I think he got player first time, and then he got lineman this time, and then Chase McGrath, who only missed the 50-yarder, he was 3 of 4, got the Special Teams Player of the Week. That was just announced by the SEC. So we'll see. Moral of the story: not sure on Tillman, but the intent was all along with the tightrope surgery to get him ready to play by the Alabama game. I look back at some of Chris Lowe's reporting and the way he referenced I think I said Bryce. Did I say Bryce Young earlier? I meant Tua Tagovailoa underwent the surgery.
Oh yeah, you're right. You did.
Sorry, my apologies. Tua Tagovailoa underwent the surgery. And I wonder if that was a little bit of a hint from Chris as to the goal was to get him back by the Alabama game. Worked with Chris a long time, so that would be pretty insightful and maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there. We'll see if he's available to play. Gerald Mincey will be available to play, but will Jeremiah Crawford play above him? We'll see. We'll see. But anything else to add, Caleb?
Nope, that was pretty much it. That was pretty much all I got. Again, I think the big thing, I think Mincey and Crawford is one of the most relevant ones, only because Heupel talked a lot about Alabama's front seven, and I think this front seven it's Alabama, so you could say any unit's going to be the best that Tennessee faces all year, but that front seven is going to be the worst part of what they're dealing with on Saturday. And Hooker showed a little bit of last year's Hendon Hooker last week. There were a couple plays where his pocket presence wasn't the best. Now, it wasn't his fault. There were missed blocks. I think Dylan Sampson just totally whiffed on a block on that first strip sack that he had. But you go for a mobile quarterback like Hooker so he can avoid those plays when they happen. And there's going to be a lot more of them this week against Alabama.
Absolutely. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Caleb will have a recap in the written word based off Josh Heupel's press conference. We'll have coverage of all the players and more on offthehooksports.com. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This